I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, holding the keys to my dream four-bedroom home, when my mother threw her designer purse onto the granite island and screamed that I had ruined her life. I was 29 years old, completely financially independent, and had just bought a house using entirely my own hard-earned savings. I had invited my parents over expecting a proud, tearful, congratulatory hug. Instead, they treated my greatest life achievement like an unforgivable personal betrayal. Through tears of genuine rage, my mother revealed their secret plan. They had already hired an architect to design a full, two-story in-law suite on my backyard plot. Their master plan was to sell their own suburban house, pocket the entire cash profit for their retirement fund, and move onto my property permanently. They never asked me. They never even mentioned it. And when I firmly told them they couldn't live with me, my father pointed a shaking finger at my face and made a threat that shattered our family forever. My name is Rachel. At 29 years old, I had spent the last 7 years working 60-hour weeks as a senior project manager at a logistics firm. I didn't take flashy vacations, I didn't buy luxury cars, and I didn't waste money on things I didn't need. My singular, burning goal was to achieve ultimate independence, buying my own home, completely on my own terms, without asking a single soul for a dime. For 6 long months, I worked quietly with a real estate agent. I searched through dozens of properties until I finally found it, a charming, 4-bedroom house on a half-acre lot in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It had a wraparound porch, a spacious backyard, and needed just enough cosmetic updating for me to make it my own. My parents, Brenda and David, had always been overbearing. Growing up, my boundaries were treated like suggestions, and my personal decisions were always subjected to their approval. I knew that if I told them I was house hunting, they would try to control the entire process, dictating the neighborhood, criticizing the layout, or insisting on giving input I didn't want. So, I kept the entire process a complete secret. I signed the final mortgage papers on a crisp Tuesday morning, closed on the house, and received the keys. I was bursting with pride. I immediately called my parents and invited them over for dinner, eagerly waiting to reveal the massive surprise. When my parents pulled into the driveway, I met them on the front porch with a bottle of champagne and a beaming smile. "Welcome to my new home," I exclaimed, spreading my arms wide. Instead of gasping in delight, my mother stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes swept over the front elevation, then shifted toward the side yard. "Your home?" she asked, her voice dangerously flat. "What do you mean, your home?" I walked them through the foyer, showing off the hardwood floors, the flooded natural light, and the renovated kitchen. But neither of my parents smiled. David, my father, walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling glass doors in the living room that looked out onto the sprawling backyard. He crossed his arms, staring intensely at the grass line. "Where is the secondary access road?" he demanded, turning around with a scowl. "Rachel, how are concrete trucks supposed to pull into this backyard without ruining the driveway?" I blinked, thoroughly confused. "Concrete trucks? Dad, what are you talking about?" My mother unzipped her purse with a violent jerk and whipped out a thick, rolled-up roll of blueprinted paper. She slammed it down on my pristine granite countertop and unrolled it with aggressive force. "We've been planning this for 2 years, Rachel," Brenda yelled, her face flushing red. "We hired an architect 6 months ago. We designed a 1,200-square-foot in-law cottage with a private garage and a ramp. We were waiting for you to buy a lot so we could build it in the back, sell our house, and move in. How could you buy a property without showing us the lot dimensions first? This layout is completely useless for our build." I stared at the blueprints in absolute horror. They had drawn a massive 2-story guest house right over where I planned to put my garden and patio. They had spent thousands on architectural designs for my future property without ever telling me. They assumed that because I was their daughter, my land automatically belonged to them. I took a deep, steadying breath, stepping back from the blueprints on the island. "Mom, Dad, I didn't consult you because this is my home. I paid for this with my own money, my own savings, and my own credit. I bought this property for myself. I am not building a secondary house in my backyard, and I am not having anyone live on my land." The room went dead quiet. The air instantly turned suffocatingly heavy. "Excuse me?" Brenda hissed, her voice trembling with rising fury. "After everything we did for you? We raised you. We paid for your braces. We let you live rent-free while you were in college. And now that you're making good money, you're just going to hoard a half-acre of land to yourself while your aging parents struggle?" "You're not struggling, Mom," I snapped back, finally losing my composure. "You live in a fully paid-off four-bedroom house in the suburbs. You have retirement funds. You didn't plan this because you were struggling. You planned this so you could sell your home, pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit, and live off my property without paying rent or land taxes." My father stepped forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over me. He pointed a thick, trembling finger directly at my face. "You listen to me right now, Rachel," he growled. "You owe your mother and me. You bought a four-bedroom house as a single woman. It's selfish, it's wasteful, and it's an insult to this family. If you refuse to build the suite, then you will put our names on the house title as co-owners immediately to compensate for this disrespect. Otherwise, you don't have a family anymore." I looked at the two people who were supposed to support me, feeling a cold, hard sensation settle in my chest. "Then I guess I don't have a family," I said quietly. "Get out of my house." The fallout began less than 12 hours later. By 7 o'clock the next morning, my phone was buzzing uncontrollably with text notifications, missed calls, and social media alerts. My parents had launched an all-out nuclear smear campaign against me across the entire extended family. They told my aunts, uncles, cousins, and old family friends a completely fabricated story. According to them, I had promised to care for them in their old age, tricked them into paying for architectural plans, and then secretly bought a luxury house and locked them out, leaving them stranded and heartbroken. My phone screen filled with venomous text messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "How could you do this to your mother after her health issues? You're an ungrateful, selfish brat. You better put Brenda and David on that deed before God punishes you." I refused to engage in the digital mudslinging. Instead, I spent the weekend painting the master bedroom and trying to regain my peace. But on Tuesday afternoon, while I was at my corporate office, a push notification popped up on my phone from my newly installed Ring doorbell camera. I tapped the screen and opened the live feed. My jaw dropped. My father was standing in my backyard alongside a man in a hard hat holding a laser measuring tool and a clipboard. David was actively pacing out the grass, pointing to my property lines, and giving instructions to a residential contractor. They were physically measuring my yard for excavation without my knowledge, permission, or consent. A hot wave of adrenaline rushed through my veins. I immediately hit the two-way audio button on the camera application. "David, get off my property right now." My voice echoed loudly out of the outdoor camera speaker. My father jumped, looking around frantically before glaring up at the camera lens. "Rachel, stop playing games and answer your phone. Mark here is giving us an estimate on the foundation pour. We need to check the soil drainage. If you and that contractor are not off my land in 90 seconds, I am calling the police and pressing formal criminal trespassing charges," I said, my voice dead calm. "And I am saving this video feed as evidence." The contractors had whipped around to look at my father in complete shock. "Wait, man, you told me this was your daughter's property and she approved the survey," the contractor exclaimed, visibly panicked. He immediately grabbed his measuring tape, apologized toward the camera, and bolted toward his truck. My father cursed loudly at the camera speaker, kicked a clump of my fresh landscaping mulch, and stormed off after him. That evening, I didn't waste any time. I hired a prominent local real estate attorney. During our consultation, my attorney uncovered something even more disturbing. My mother had actually contacted my real estate agent 2 weeks before I closed on the house. She had posed as my financial co-sponsor and tried to convince the agent to add her name to the title documents before closing. The agent had shut her down, but Brenda had kept quiet about her failed attempt. My attorney immediately drafted a formal, legally binding cease and desist letter. It explicitly stated that any further unannounced visits, unauthorized contractor visits, or attempts to access my real estate would result in immediate civil restraining orders and criminal charges. 3 weeks later came the annual Thanksgiving family dinner, hosted at my Aunt Clara's house. I knew my parents would be there, and I knew they expected me to hide in shame and skip the gathering. But I was done hiding. I packed a sleek leather folder in my purse and walked into Aunt Clara's dining room with my head held high. The moment I stepped through the door, the room fell into an uncomfortable, icy silence. My mother sat at the head of the table, wearing a tragic, tearful expression for the gathered relatives, while my father crossed his arms, refusing to look at me. Aunt Clara stood up, clearing her throat loudly. "Rachel, I'm surprised you showed up after how you've treated your poor mother. She's been sick with stress over your cruelty." I smiled politely, took my seat at the far end of the table, and pulled out the leather folder. "I'm glad everyone is here," I said, my voice loud and crystal clear, "because I think it's time we clear up the lies once and for all." I opened the folder and pulled out thick stacks of printed, stapled papers. I passed them down the table to my aunts, uncles, and cousins. "What you're holding," I explained as my mother's face drained of all color, "are the official legal cease and desist documents served to my parents. Along with them are high-definition security camera timestamps showing my father trespassing on my land with a contractor while I was at work." The family members began flipping through the pages, murmuring in shock. Furthermore, I continued, staring directly at my pale, trembling mother, "here are the architectural invoices showing they spent $6,000 secretly designing an in-law suite for a house I hadn't even bought yet. They planned to sell their $500,000 home, pocket every single dollar of the cash profit, and force me to pay the mortgage, property taxes, and land maintenance for their free retirement cottage. They didn't offer a single dollar for the down payment, the mortgage, or the property." My Aunt Clara stared at the paper in her hand, then looked up at my mother with absolute disgust. "Brenda, is this true? You tried to put yourself on her deed without paying anything." My mother opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She sputtered, looking around the table for support, but every single relative who had spent weeks harassing me was now staring at her in sheer disbelief. The narrative had completely collapsed. I picked up my purse, adjusted my coat, and stood up from the dinner table. I had delivered the truth, exposed the entitlement, and restored my reputation in front of every person who mattered. I didn't need to stay for the arguments that followed. I walked out of Aunt Clara's house, leaving my parents to answer for their own greed. In the months that followed, I made the clean, necessary decision to go completely no contact with Brenda and David. They tried sending emotional text messages and half-hearted apologies through third parties once the family turned against them, but I held my boundary like a fortress. They had proven that their love was conditional, based entirely on what they could extract from my success. Today, my home is my absolute sanctuary. I spent the spring transforming my half-acre backyard into a breathtaking personal oasis. Where my parents wanted to pour a massive concrete foundation for an uninvited in-law suite, I planted a lush, sprawling vegetable garden, built a stone fire pit, and set up a cozy outdoor seating area. I host weekend dinner parties for friends who genuinely love and support me, and I wake up every single morning in a house that belongs entirely to me. I learned that blood doesn't give anyone an automatic license to cross your boundaries, exploit your hard work, or claim ownership over your life. Now, I want to ask you, what would you do if your parents secretly planned to move onto your property without asking? Would you have set the same boundary, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below.